Bienvenidos y bienvenidas al tercer capítulo de Sin Fronteras. Nos encontramos en Boston, donde conoceremos el trabajo del colectivo Black and Pink. Viajaremos a Providence para conversar con Ashanti Alston, uno de los miembros fundadores del ex partido de las Panteras Negras. También estaremos en el Instituto Tecnológico de Massachusetts, conversando con Noam Chomsky. Así que ya lo saben, quédense con nosotros, esto es Sin Fronteras.
Boston is the capital of the state of Massachusetts and the largest city in the region known as New England, which encompasses the 6 most northeastern states in the U.S. While most of New England is rural, mountainous, and relatively poor, Boston is by and large the economic center of the region. In fact, it is typically rated among the wealthiest and most developed cities in the U.S. and the 6th most developed in the world. Boston is also one of the earliest European settlements in the U.S. and has a complex history starting with the Puritans, who immigrated to the area in search of religious freedom in the early 1600s. It was also the birthplace of the American Revolution and Revolutionary War, American industrialism, and the abolitionist movement against slavery, which precipitated the earliest incarnations of American anarchism. It is the intellectual capital of the U.S., with over 100 universities in the metropolitan area. With such a consolidation of wealth and power in the city, many oppressed communities are being pushed to the city's periphery. The cost of living has increased exponentially in the last 50 years, forcing these people to survive in increasingly difficult conditions in one of the most intense waves of gentrification ever recorded.
What do we want? Justice! What do we want it? Now! What do we want? Justice! What do we want it?
Nos encontramos en el frontis del Instituto Tecnológico de Massachusetts y hemos venido a hablar con Noam Chomsky, quien gentilmente ha hecho un espacio en su agenda para recibir en exclusiva al equipo de Sin Fronteras. Profesor Chomsky, bienvenido a Sin Fronteras. Estados Unidos tiene la población carcelaria más grande del mundo. Por otra parte, ha habido un aumento en la pérdida de derechos civiles aquí en este país. ¿Cree usted que existe posibilidad real de revertir una situación como esta?
Actually, one of the mainstream scholars who works on Latin America and social issues, Charles Berquist, pointed out that, as he put it, a good case can be made that the incarceration system is a method of controlling what are called the dangerous classes, people who might disturb existing forms of conformity and obedience, and of carrying out counterinsurgency in Latin America. He's referring specifically to the drug war, and I think that's basically correct. If you look at the prison population in the United States, it began to, in the 1970s, it wasn't very different from other industrial countries. Around 1980, it began to escalate, and it's just gone to the stratosphere since then. A huge amount of it is nonviolent crimes, like having marijuana in your pocket. A lot of it is just a so-called drug war. The drug war has almost nothing to do with drugs. It has no effect on availability of drugs or drug prices, but it has served as a technique to criminalize black life. From the way it's designed, from police actions up through sentencing, through post-prison principles, is essentially designed to make it's designed in such a way as effectively to criminalize black life. And that's not new in American history. It's worth looking at the history. Of course, for a century, the history was slave labor camps, horrible slave labor camps, which created the basis of the modern economy. So all of these things relate to significant parts of a long historical development. The point about the counterinsurgency in the Third World is quite correct. So the drug policies in Colombia, Bolivia, Peru, other countries are basically part of counterinsurgency programs. So on the one hand, you have you have a drug war which is not just counterinsurgency, but also driving peasants off the land by what's called fumigation, effectively chemical warfare, opening it up for multinational development, rich ranchers, and so on. If you take a look at the actual prison population, to get back to the original question, in the federal system is overwhelmingly drug-related and targeting mainly blacks, but minorities generally, people who are essentially superfluous from the point of view of the way the economic systems now function.
Históricamente, desde las organizaciones sociales, espacios de resistencia a nivel popular, ¿ha habido reticencia frente a la participación o a la manera que han tenido los académicos de participar de una manera muy distante y por lo general desconectada de las luchas locales? Usted, como representante de este mundo académico, ¿cómo podría hacerse cargo de estas críticas? ¿Y qué mensaje le dejaría al resto de los intelectuales que tienen intenciones de contribuir al desarrollo del movimiento social?
Well, you could say that about professional elites generally. They tend to pursue their own professional interests, their own lives, their own welfare, and so on. It's a very privileged class. You have access to resources, you have time, you have education, reasonably decent lifestyle. There are plenty of opportunities for people of this class to contribute significantly to ongoing social struggles, which can use the contribution of intellectuals for information, for organization, for ideas, for simply even things like workers' education. And there are a fair number of people who do it, but it's a choice. It's not a criticism of the university. Individuals have the choice of contributing to human welfare or pursuing their own interests. Everyone has it. A carpenter has the same choice. A university professor has a much richer range of opportunities, so the responsibilities are greater. I think the criticism is not so much labeled at the institution as at individuals within the institutions, whatever they are, who make the choice not to become engaged in ongoing social struggle. And it's a mixture. There are some who do in their own ways, sometimes very importantly.
Usted es un buen conocedor de las luchas a nivel internacional. ¿Hay alguna experiencia en particular que le dé más esperanza, no sé, de un futuro distinto?
Well, I think we can distinguish two categories of such developments. There are those that are resisting oppression, violence, terror, suppression of rights, and so on. There's another category which essentially follows Bakunin's proposal to, as he put it, build the facts of the future within the present society. So just build islands of a more just and free society within the structure of the existing oppressive one. And there are interesting developments there. Say worker-owned enterprises. There's one huge conglomerate, Mondragon, has its flaws, but substantial achievement. And things like that are developing elsewhere. There's a substantial growth of cooperatives, small worker-owned enterprises in the United States, in what's called the Rust Belt, the areas of industrial centers which were exported for cheaper labor elsewhere and are decaying. Say, northern Ohio, Indiana, there is an interesting growth of a network of worker-owned enterprises, some of them pretty substantial. That could expand, and I think that's an extremely positive development. And it could lead to very substantial changes in the country.
Profesor Chomsky, muchas gracias por su tiempo.
Welcome! This is the Lucy Parsons Center. We're located at 358A Center Street in Jamaica Plain, neighborhood of Boston. And we've been around since 1970. We represent all different currents of revolutionary thought, leftist literature, cool books, some free books, and we're all volunteer collective. Come visit us here in Boston. Most importantly, keep watching No Borders, Sin Fronteras.
I started Black and Pink when I got out of prison and wanting to stay connected with folks that I had been connected to while I was on the inside. And it began as a project really to just build connections between free world lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender folks and incarcerated lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender folks, and really kind of building connections for the purpose of movement building, with the opportunity to educate both folks on the outside, but then also build power with folks on the inside around the movement to abolish the prison industrial complex. Black and Pink began as an explicitly anarchist effort, the black flag of anarchism, pink being about queering that, but we're not an explicitly anarchist organization at this point. There are anarchist folks who are part of Black and Pink, but we as a group do not identify as an anarchist organizing effort at this point. But we've held on to the name as part of who we are since it's been now 10 years that we've been doing organizing work with queer and trans prisoners across the United States, where we now reach about 8,000 prisoners, making us the largest ever LGBTQ prisoner organization in the world.
My name is Gabriel. Right now I am working on inputting this survey into the computer. I started in Black and Pink last summer, and I've been coming as much as I can ever since then. It's really important because, you know, I feel like a lot of people are just completely forgotten, and especially gay and lesbian people behind bars, you know, just it's not thought about in regular society.
In the United States, we are the largest incarcerator in the world. There are more prisoners in the US than anywhere else. We have 5% of the world's population, but 25% of the world's prisoners. So there are 2.4 million people currently in prison in the US as we're talking right now. LGBTQ folks are incredibly disproportionately incarcerated. We can't say what the actual numbers are exactly because we don't have that research, and it's not exactly necessary, because we do know that LGBTQ folks experience much higher rates of policing, much higher rates of homelessness, higher rates of being involved in the sex trades, and are just more criminalized, particularly LGBTQ communities of color, specifically Black trans women, but also poor and urban-based and street-based LGBTQ folks.
My name's Johannes. I've been part of Black and Pink for 3 years, working on a survey. So this survey we sent out, I think, last November or October, or maybe a little earlier than that, to just get more information about the people who we connect with. So there's not a lot of data showing what the experience of LGBT prisoners is like. There's some studies that have been done by some people, like Sylvia Rivera Law Project and Hearts on a Wire, two organizations also in the Northeast, who have done smaller studies of mostly trans and gender nonconforming prisoners. But we wanted to do a really big survey of LGBTQ prisoners as a whole. We also asked people through our newspaper. We sent in, we asked people questions like, what do you want to know about our family in prison? So like they sent us some questions that they wanted to include in the survey. So they designed about half of the questions and told us what to ask. And then we came up with some other questions too. And we asked them, what would you want to use this data for? So they said that they would want it to send it to like policymakers to help make reforms to the prison system, and also send it to LGBT organizations to sort of help them know what is happening to LGBT prisoners and figure out, tell them that they need to care about LGBT prisoners and need to start doing work for them.
has volunteers all across the country. We have hundreds of people actually building the community that we are trying to create. And every Sunday here in Boston, we gather to respond to letters from prisoners, to work on our survey, the National LGBTQ Prisoner Survey, where we're gathering information about the experiences of LGBTQ folks who are in prison. We also write cards to just let folks inside know that we're thinking about them. And then we're also building community ourselves to build relationships and trust so that we can engage in this movement towards prison abolition together. That we're talking about what does it mean to create a world where we don't have prisons? How do we answer some of the tough and hard questions about what do we do about people who cause violence? What do we do about the harm that's really happening in our communities? If we're not responding with prisons, what are we going to respond with? And so we can have some of those conversations as we get to know each other and do some of the basic work that needs to be done. And so we gather here in Boston every Sunday from 1 to 4:30. People can just drop in and do some work together. And it really varies week to week who's here, but we're always trying to get to know each other better and share in the responsibility of all the different pieces of the work.
Tras permanecer algunos días en Boston, viajamos 50 millas al sur hacia la ciudad de Providence, en el estado de Rhode Island, para visitar a Ashanti Alston, un miembro fundador del Partido de las Panteras Negras y ex militante del Ejército de Liberación Negra, quien durante sus 11 años de encarcelamiento se acercó a las ideas anarquistas, desarrollando una filosofía política de base antiautoritaria e identidad revolucionaria, distinguiendo por su llamado a la construcción de una nación negra. Ashanti, muchas gracias por habernos recibido en tu casa. Bienvenido a Sin Fronteras. Cuéntanos, ¿cuáles fueron las primeras experiencias que te involucraron en la actividad revolucionaria?
Well, I'm out of Plainfield, New Jersey. I was born in 1954, so this was during the height of the Civil Rights Movement and into the 60s, the Black Power movement that came out of the Civil Rights Movement. So as a young teenager, like 13, 14 years old, there was a rebellion in my hometown during this rebellion, and it was for like 6 days. But during this 6 days, I saw black people manifest black power. As teenagers, we found out about the Panthers, and from there, we learned more about what a revolution takes. We were a young group, but we were really young. I mean, most of us were teenagers except for maybe 2 or 3 adults. But we were able to establish a Panther office. We was able to establish another office building that was a free clothing program. Also in our hometown, we started a free lunch program. And it was there that we began to see that you could have revolutionary ideas and work amongst people, serving the people's needs, that was actually also raising the people's consciousness about what was wrong with this society. So as Panthers was trying to implement serve the people programs, the police was framing them, arresting them on all kind of what we call bogus charges. With the FBI program, which we didn't know the full extent, but it was called the counterintelligence program. We didn't know the full extent, but it was creating such a paranoia within the Panther Party that we were beginning to be suspicious of each other, and a lot of arguments, a lot of infighting, to the point where there was actually a split. So the government, with the police and the media, were able to separate us from the people. And then when they started to come after us, they was able to capture a lot of us. When it became difficult to work above ground in the communities, decided that we were going to go underground and join the ranks of the Black Liberation Army. One of the points of the Black Panther Party, one of the rules was that you couldn't join any army other than the Black Liberation Army, which was that arm of the black community that would defend the black community and help promote that struggle for liberation.
Tras tu paso por prisión, tu perspectiva política fue acercándose al anarquismo. ¿Nos podrías explicar un poco más cómo se produjo este cambio?
One of my comrades, Sundiata Akoli, who has been in prison now for 40 years, he would say, turn that prison into a university. And for us, who are now Black Liberation Army soldiers, political prisoners of war, we was reading inside the prisons. If we could get literature in, we would read it. Or we would find that there was political prisoners in there before us who left all kind of literature. I happened to get my hands on some books on critical theory that was giving me an understanding of authoritarianism. I'm also reading feminism. I'm also reading radical psychology. And all of them is now giving me these different lenses to look at what we were trying to do, what we did, and give me some different ways of thinking about what went wrong and what we could have done better. What was happening in the process, though, is that I'm moving further and further away from the Marxism, Leninism, the Maoism, and I feel like I'm moving away from a certain kind of nationalism. But what happens when I get out is that I'm looking now for anarchist groups to get a practical idea of it. And one of the groups that existed pretty strong back then was called Love and Rage. When I saw how they had their meetings, when I saw the style that they worked, then I began to understand more about how anarchist principles operated in practice. And it was the only groups that I saw dealing with issues like that around race and sex beyond class was the anarchists. At least they were talking about it. I'm not saying they were perfect, but I just appreciated the fact that they was putting it on the table, trying to make attempts to deal with the internal oppression that we sometimes act out on each other.
Las corrientes más clásicas, revolucionarias, tanto anarquistas, marxistas, han concentrado el foco del conflicto en la lucha de clases. Y nosotros sabemos que tú tienes una perspectiva distinta. ¿Nos podrías explicar un poco más la crítica que tú tienes hasta esta visión revolucionaria?
Okay. In this country, there's always been these problems with activists in general, revolutionaries also, who, whether they're Marxists or anarchists, and white, there's been problems in that they tend to interpret their ism from a purely European perspective. The anarchism that myself and others in APOC, comes out of our experiences here with white supremacy. But a perfect example of like how racism infiltrates our movement is like if you take the Occupy Wall Street movement. It starts off with a bang, and from all reports, it seemed like it's decentralized, it's horizontal, it's all these new words that says it's kind of anarchist. But it shows you that even with those things, this basically white-led movement was excluding people of color. You cannot include Native folks, you cannot include Latino folks, you cannot include black folks unless we're right in your face. And then when we're in your face, you still won't give up your positions of privilege. You will get out there, you will organize, you will do all of this, but we don't have your resources and we don't have your skin. So when you go get arrested, you're going to get out soon. You're going to go back to them privileged families. And if we get arrested, it may be a whole different story. We have not been able to rely on white movement folks to back us, to get our back, to respect us. What they may call identity struggles, we telling them that don't make us Americans, don't make us workers. We are African people. We are, if you can't get anything, we're people of African descent who was brought here in chains. you know. And if you can't deal with that reality, then we're probably going to have a problem working together. If you can't deal with what this country did on the backs of Turtle Island, then we're probably going to have problems working together. If you think it's just about being Americans who want to change America and not bring it to an end, we're probably not going to be able to work together. So the anarchists of color would have some pretty sharp differences with other folks, even with the white anarchists.
Ashanti, muchas gracias por tu tiempo y no sé si quieres decirle algo a las personas que están viendo Sin Fronteras. Esta es la oportunidad.
Thank you. And I thank you for even coming here to Providence while you're here in the United States to do this. I mean, I'm really honored. The Zapatistas say, you know, we can create a world where many worlds exist. It's a great vision, you know. So we have those type of dreams that can sustain us and make all this worthwhile. Don't worry about death. You know, we're all going to die, but how we live our lives to that point is what's really important. So join, get involved, remember our political prisoners, but know that we can win.
Estamos llegando al final de un nuevo capítulo de Sin Fronteras y nos acompaña Evan Greer, un artista queer que ha estado presente en los espacios de resistencia aquí en Boston. Evan, bienvenido a Sin Fronteras.
Gracias. Thanks for having me.
¿Cuándo comenzaste a ser parte de la escena de resistencia aquí en Boston y por qué motivo?
So for me, I got involved in radical politics when I was in high school, when I was a teenager. And basically the moment for me was after 9/11, when the United States military invaded Afghanistan, and just watching this clear injustice unfolding overseas and feeling like I had some responsibility to fight back against my own government's actions. And then starting to organize a couple of protests and feeling like these protests weren't accomplishing anything. Just, you know, standing out in the streets with signs wasn't going to be enough to halt a system that had been oppressing and colonizing people all over the world for, you know, hundreds of years. And so that was what brought me to getting more involved in more radical politics and meeting up with other people that were interested in working more seriously to change the system.
Tú te defines como un artista queer. ¿Qué relación tiene eso con la música que hace?
Sure. I mean, for me, queer is a term that means resistance. It means resistance to the assumptions and ideas that our society has about gender, about sexuality, but it also means resistance to capitalism and the systems of oppression that oppress all marginalized people regardless of their identities. And so my music, you know, maybe I'll be singing about making out with a boy or singing about, you know, what it means to be trans or gender variant, but in the end I'm also always tying it back to these other issues of economics, of racial justice, of the prison system, these things that are all connected. And so for me as a queer artist, you know, whether I'm playing in a gay bar or a union hall, I want to be bringing all of my politics into this space and, you know, presenting myself as a whole person and sharing the fullest extent of myself with the world. I guess that's what it means to me to be queer.
¿Cómo sientes que ha sido percibido o cómo es la recepción de la gente en estos espacios donde tú has podido presentar la música que estás haciendo?
I really find just amazing responses everywhere I go. And, you know, sometimes I'm playing in very explicit, radical, or activist spaces where you kind of expect people to like music that's about this stuff. But what I found is that the vast majority of people everywhere don't trust the government, they don't trust the police, they don't trust these centralized systems of authority that have been negatively affecting their lives. And so when you come into a space where people aren't used to hearing politics and you sing about them instead of just kind of lecturing or talking to people about them, I have found that that's a really effective way to reach out to people who maybe normally wouldn't agree with me right off the bat if I just started talking to them about the politics or the way I feel. But singing songs and sharing stories and using art, I think has always been a way to reach people that we can't reach otherwise and to build our movement and make it stronger.
Gracias por habernos acompañado hasta el final de este programa. Están todos invitados a ver los siguientes capítulos de No Borders. Y para terminar, los dejamos con Evan Greer.
Ya basta
Enough is enough. Ya basta. Enough is enough. You ask why are we angry, I say look at history. The cause of all our troubles, it's not a mystery. There are those whose lives are easy, there are those whose lives are rough. Now is the time for us to rise and cry out, enough is enough! Borders, enough nations, enough corporate exploitation, enough racist air pollution, enough racist institutions, enough chains and enough cages, and enough starvation wages, enough highways and gas stations, enough gentrification. We won't take it anymore. Yeah, this is class war. We'll fight you in the streets. We will dance on your defeat. Ya basta! Ya basta! Ya basta! Ya basta! I swear to you there'll be a day when your melting pot will boil, and you only bring us closer with each war you make for oil. Each union that you break and each ballot box you stuff brings us closer to the day we will cry out, enough is enough! Greedy politicians, enough gender role traditions, enough hierarchies, enough of living on our knees, enough gouging of the planet, enough destruction of the earth, enough tearing of its flesh to see what the insides might be worth. We won't take it anymore. All this is class war. We'll fight you in the streets. We will dance on your defeats. Ya basta! Ya basta! Ya basta! Ya basta! And all around the world, the people are fighting back. Each day another shard of their system starts to crack. In Cairo and Argentina, with our rage and with our love, the people are all crying out, enough is enough! War and occupation, enough propaganda stations, enough enforced reality, enough police brutality, and enough nuclear arms. Oh, enough factory farms, enough stolen women's choices, enough silenced women's voices. We won't take it anymore. Oh, this is class war. We'll fight you in the streets. We will dance on your defeats. Ya basta! Ya basta! Ya basta! Ya basta! Enough words have been said, enough songs have been sung, enough protests have been had, enough banners have been hung. We are many, they are few. There is so much we can do when we use what we have learned and fight them on our own terms, because they need us. We don't need them. It's our sweat and labor on which they all depend. They need us to drive their trucks. They need us to shine their crowns. They need us to be the cops who beat our comrades down. But what good are all those laws with no one to institute them? What good are all those guns? There's no one there to shoot them. We won't take it anymore. Yeah, this is class war. We'll fight you in the streets. We will dance on your defeats. Ya basta! Ya basta! Ya basta! Ya basta!